Hello dear friends. In the video we talk about the conjunction, or let's say meeting, of Jupiter and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn in the year 2020. This conjunction will occur 3 times in the year 2020 and it is one of the so-called great conjunctions. I have already made 2 videos of the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. And there will be another video, the third, about the third conjunction, and I will record it during this year. That will be about the conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. So these are 3 major conjunctions in Capricorn in the year 2020, and they are very unique event in the history and speak of changing of the ruling structures in the world and changing of political and economical ideologies. So in this video I talk about the general characteristics of this event. I'm not going to talk about the impact on individuals, and I will certainly record a video about the effect of the aspect on individual horoscopes, or to say for each zodiac sign. So Jupiter was last in Capricorn since late 2007 and during the 2008. And watch what happened. Jupiter met with Pluto just before it entered into the Capricorn sign. So Jupiter entered the Capricorn sign in 2008, as did Pluto the same. And that was the year or the beginning of the world economic crisis, as they say. So the so-called crisis was marked by Pluto together with Jupiter, and now we see them again in the same sign, and we are experiencing this conjunction in 2020, which should be actually the peak of their meetings, and possibly this year will resolve that crisis that started in the year 2008, which were of course not just economic crises. So let's remember what happened in 2007 and 2008. So at that time, the story of the fight against terrorism started, or we can say started to develop more, because actually it started on September 11, 2001, and since then there have been increasing wars, especially in the Middle East and of course in other countries. So they say that they were fighting against terrorism, which we did not really see in the world. So who knows what was that about? To remind you another thing, on this September 11th, there was the opposition of Saturn and Pluto, while in January 2020, there was the conjunction of Saturn and Pluto. So when these 2 planets meet, things like that are happening in the world. So what do we conclude now? Well, we conclude that the year 2020 repeats the year 2001 and the year 2008 at the same time to a certain extent. Of course, we have to ask ourselves, why do people fight, and why there are wars in the world? The question is also who has been forcing wars in the last 30 years and why somebody was doing that. So as far as I learned, there are different forms of war. Apart from attacking the military, there is also psychological war, there is biological war, there is chemical war, and even a satellite war. So I suggest that everyone should be informed about those types of wars as much as possible. But, well, Jupiter and Pluto meet in the year 2020. So they meet at the 24th and 22nd degree of Capricorn, and this is happening at the first meeting at the end of March, beginning of April, the second in June, and the last one in November. So this conjunction is one of those that we refer to as Phoenix. This is where life is born again from ashes. So it does not emerge from an egg. Phoenix cannot be born from an egg. It is born from ashes. This phoenix symbolism also has appeared in the year 2007-8, when the world's power realized that maybe their end can be close, so they created quite big house in order to survive and maybe even in order to become richer. So they start stealing even more money through banks, loans, and of course through wars, which was for a long time already, the most lucrative business, unfortunately. I'm very sorry to say that. So in that time, the symbolism of phoenix was used basically in the wrong way, as we see. So you would maybe ask why they needed more money. Well, most probably they needed more money for some big projects. But let's hope that from the end of the 2020, new human system will be born as phoenix. And that energy will not be on their side, but will be on our side. And that humanity will be reborn, for which there are indications, very strong indications, just obviously this process is very difficult. Let's not forget that this meeting of the two planets happens in Capricorn, and that's the sign of politics and leading political structures in the world and in separate countries. Also, the two planets made during the year 2013 and 14 oppositions. Then they had very difficult squares in 2016 and 17. So the year 2020 is just the top of those processes. So we say in 2020 Jupiter and Pluto meet 3 times. The first meeting is in the late March and early April, and it has its weight because it is the first one. So we have felt it since the beginning of the 2020. It was prepared. And only it culminates, astrologically saying, in the first 10 days of April. The second meeting is going to be in June, when the eclipse period starts. There are going to be eclipses in June, which is of the utmost importance, because then it will be obvious that the position of old politics, old science, and pyramidal management in the world, and also this old domination, has finished. It will be more than obvious. After that, what will be happening in June, Mars will enter Aries sign, adding it intensity, and adding intensity also to the events that will come later on in fall. So November is the last meeting then between Jupiter and Pluto, and in fact this is the time when this great conjunction will have the biggest effect on the society and the world, and let's hope that it will be a positive one. So what Pluto means, I have talked about Pluto specifically in my video named Plutocracy. So I suggest to you to watch this video if you want to learn about Pluto energy. Pluto rules with fear. But Pluto does not have only negative effects. Of course not. This is that phoenix, yes? But unfortunately we have to speak also about negative effects. So yes, it is fear. Fear is coming from Pluto, not only from Pluto. It's not only connected with Pluto. And let's say what we are afraid of. Well, first of all, man is afraid of death and illness. And Pluto energy is the energy that is very much aware of this. That's why Pluto manipulates with those fears. And what Pluto uses for this? It uses money and creates often addictions. So money, drugs, alcohol, sex, all of those addictions are in game here. There is also another addiction, that's addiction on power. When one thinks that powerful, all-knowing people should lead him because he cannot be responsible for himself. There is this addiction also. But I'm not going to discuss that much Pluto now. I would like more to talk about Jupiter. So I have often talked about Jupiter in previous years in my videos, mainly speaking about transits of Jupiter, like Jupiter in Sagittarius, Jupiter in Capricorn. Then I also edited short versions of this video of Jupiter transit in Capricorn. So if you wish, you can watch them. But let's say something about Jupiter again. Jupiter is the planet that gives meaning to everything. So this energy says that everything has some higher meaning. If we are in a situation that does not make sense to us, then either Jupiter is very weak or suppressed under the influence of some constellations, or we do not see that higher meaning. In classical astrology, Jupiter represents law, justice, religion, respect, everything that brings recognition by the society. It is a planet of happiness, generosity, and well-being in every way. In Indian astrology and spiritual science, Jupiter is that guru that I speak a lot about, and the most respected spiritual principle. In astropsychology, Jupiter is the archetype of spiritual manifestation. It is not a planet that, let's say it first, it is a planet that symbolizes the principle that creates mythological world of a man. We see and we experience the world and life based on that, what do we believe in? And that is the energy of Jupiter. This is an internal principle that precedes everything that appears outside in the world, but this principle does not manifest itself in a physical form. And it is in the same way experienced in individual and the collective. When major changes are taking place in the world, changes that can be considered epochal or civilizational changes, that what is happening actually is the process of the change of the mythology, or to say change of that what people believe in. And this always affects life on micro plane. And this is happening now in the world. One mythology replaces another in the 2020, and actually this year is the culmination, because this process is happening for the long time already. But only in 2020, this is the end of the process, and that's why it is so obvious and everyone must see it now. So how are these changes happening? So this happens because usually the old science, including physics even, medicine, biology, or the old laws of economics, or the old politics is no longer valid. So now in spring of the 2020, we see the struggle of the sciences in the fields of medicine and microbiology. That's quite obvious. Because one school is defining something about the disease that is happening in the world, and another school is saying something else. And it would be very desirable to have the third school that will destroy those previous two completely, because it offers new option, new medicine, and that will talk about frequency, vibration, and energy. Well, if that happens, then we begin to believe that man can be treated and live in a very different way, and that will change our view of the world and our reality. So a new mythology is gradually created, which then affects all areas of life. This was also the case in the earliest stages of humanity development, when it was discovered, for example, that Earth cycles around the Sun. or when some physical and mechanical laws were discovered. For example, one such paradigm shift could have happened at the beginning of the 20th century with the discoveries of Nikola Tesla, but his direction in the development of science was suppressed. And suppressed, of course, very unnaturally, and that in a way stopped the natural development of mankind. And many people know and feel that strongly, and that's why more and more there are many Teslians in the world. Because if you suppress that most probably that will grow extremely strong later on. But from the point of view of spiritual science, Jupiter represents man's conscience. So I did not say morality, we can talk about that also, but I did not say morality, I said conscience. And in the Indian spiritual tradition, it is a planet of the Dharma. Also, this planet symbolizes faith in God, and it's a planet of intuition, actually symbolizes intuition. And these are the meanings I want to talk about in this video. Conscience, Dharma, faith in God, or to say religion, and intuition. So, Marcus Jale, a German astrologer whose work I greatly appreciate, says that at the time when Jupiter and Pluto are making difficult aspects, it is important to find people who have morals, because one has to bear the burden of events and to be a support to people at times when incredible political and other scandals appear. However, I want to build on this, and I want to warn that it is important to find people who have conscience. So what is conscience? Many have stopped using this word, unfortunately. But Gurdjieff, very important mystic, perfectly explained what conscience is. In the first place, he explains that conscience and morality are not the same, because there is nothing in the concept of morality that is general. That which is moral in China, for example, it's not moral in Caucasia or somewhere else. However, conscience is important. Conscience is, according to Gurdjieff, in the sphere of feelings, the same as consciousness in the field of intellect. Notice that today everyone is talking about consciousness, but a few only talk about conscious. And of course, Gurdjieff adds that human being has problem to relate to consciousness, and that man has problem to recognize conscious in himself. Of course, his philosophy is drastic in many ways, but let's see what he's talking about. Let's see more. According to him, conscious is a state in which a person simultaneously feels everything what he or she can feel. But since everyone has 1,000 contradictory feelings that expose, for example, their own nothingness on dumbness or self-deception or self-delusion and so on, then one cannot stand to feel it, all that at one time. So if a man could not bear to feel all his contradictions at the same time, he would realize that if man could bear to feel all his contradictions at the same time, he would realize that everything he loves, he hates at the same time, and he will realize that when he speaks the truth, he says lies at the same time. So, when he feels the shame and horror of all that at once, if he would feel the shame and horror of all that, That would be the condition that Gurdjieff called conscious. So conscious is that you accept all that contradictory feelings that you have at once. And you are ashamed of that, but you accept it. But a man in that condition, as Gurdjieff says, cannot live and must destroy either conscious or those contradictions. But he cannot destroy all those contradictions because they are there. So what he does, human is created in such a way, Gurdjieff says, that he cannot destroy the conscious, the same as he cannot destroy contradictions. So he has to put those conscious into sleep. Waking up from that is only possible for those who seek for it, who want it. That's what Gurdjieff explained. Okay, so majority of people often feel the indications of conscious and wonder about themselves and their work. So they feel it in a way. They know about their conscious, even if it's sleepy. But there are also people who have almost no conscious. So for a person who lives today, even though he often has a sleeping conscious, it is still absolutely unbelievable to accept that there are people who are almost without conscious. But it seems that it is so, yet they exist, and even they have reached the leading positions in the world. And one of the most important things is to understand that first. So during the current meeting of Jupiter and Pluto, this will be very clearly demonstrated. And it's up to us to deal with that. As a humanity, of course. I believe that there are going to be more and more people who are aware of this. Because this conjunction means that everything that happens is massive. It's happened to masses. So at this time, it is very easy to manipulate with masses. That is why it is important to do in this time what really makes sense, because meaningless actions can bring great downfall to many people. This is this massiveness here. But conscious awakening and also awakening of consciousness can also be very huge and massive in today's time. So, okay, all of those sufferings that we are going through with Jupiter and Pluto and with other constellations make sense. Now, for example, there are many neuroses, psychoses, fears, but all of them can do something very good, especially if when we go through all those processes, finally, later on, we become more conscious. And of course, if we awake our consciousness, which is another term. True knowledge often comes after the worst possible life experiences, although this is not true 100%, but in combination of Jupiter and Pluto, it almost is. And of course, it may be very crucial that appear people who are in the world's leading positions, who have conscience. I believe that there are such people. Those people have responsibility for the lives of others and should acknowledge to all of others as soon as possible what is really happening in the world, in the fields of health, modern technologies, finances, politics, and so on. So when they say the truth, especially about modern technologies that they're using, I'm sure that virus will naturally disappear. So the truth, I believe, is something that we need. That will solve everything. Okay, we said that Jupiter is the planet of Dharma. So let's speak now a little bit about Dharma. As it is said, everyone has his own Dharma. Hinduism clearly defines it. And we can read about that in the book of Manu's Law. I'm sure you heard about that. Whose teaching and morals, let's say here morals, are close to morals of Slavic people and some other nations in the world. So what is Dharma? It is very difficult to translate this term, but we learn from Manu's Law that it is what man holds within himself as his basic principle, which determines his sense of justice, social order, law, duty, religion, and faith. Each of us has our own Dharma, and when we follow this basic internal principle, there is nothing to fear. However, those who run the country or the world itself have a different Dharma than others. Their responsibility is extremely high. They should guard the entire society and maintain order in it. Unfortunately, in many countries of the world, there has been negative selection for decades, so leading people are often the worst ones. So imagine where we come from. Of course, this is not everywhere. It is not the case in Russia. It is not the case in India. There are many countries in the world where this process did not happen, or it did not happen that drastically, of course. So those who have the greatest responsibility in today's world are in many countries the most miserable people. Okay, so let's now ask ourselves, why do we need a religion? Because we need to understand religion through this energy of Jupiter. That's where I would like to take the ideas of Pavel Florensky, which was a great scientist and mystic. He says religion has a job to save us. What does religion save us from? The answer is from ourselves. It saves our inner world from the chaos that sits within it. The religion conquers the hell that is in us. Religion defeats the reptiles, as he says, that come from the subconscious and want to govern our soul. You see how fantastic this explanation of Florensky is. And Florensky goes on to say that salvation, in the broadest psychological sense, is a balance within one's soul. So one may ask how to strike a balance and how to make contact with one's soul, of course. It's a good question, how to do that. Well, in the first place, one should remove everything that comes from the outside and what confuses oneself, himself, herself, and makes chaos in one's soul. So that is why in the East people meditate. That's why they invented meditation. The same results come from inner prayer, that is in Orthodox religion or some other religions as well. So when one begins to do so, he will stop being confused by information that comes to him from outside, and he will not even need those informations. He will develop the intuition, and that is what one needs. So now we are at the point of intuition. And I wanted to say something about intuition because it is also tightly connected to the archetype of Jupiter. So we can't find out what is going really in the world, or even what is going on now in the year 2020, if we just gather information. Many information are completely false. So it is necessary for intuition to tell us the truth. That's a very difficult process. And through this process, of course, many are going through now. There are so many lies that have been spilled in the world and around us for so long time that it is, of course, first very tragic, but then there is a problem to deal with them. We are lost in those lies. Many are lost in those lies. But we are still not lost completely. So we are still here. We can still change a lot. We just need to understand it as quickly as possible. Okay, I also want to say that some sort of messages that are coming from this conjunction. This conjunction is quite difficult, but if a miracle saves us, and I believe it will, and I know that the miracle is coming from the east side of the world, though there are forces in the west that can build on the process. So if that saves us, then each of us should take an oath to God that we will never live again without conscience, in a selfish, insensitive, and irresponsible way, that we will spread awareness, that we will work on ourselves daily, and be aware that our thoughts and actions affect the entire universe. That is actually that we have to admit and owe to God that every moment of our existence we are all responsible, not just for ourselves, but for the entire universe. This just like that as some religions of the world are teaching. In every moment of our lives we are responsible for the whole universe. Pluto and Jupiter bring difficult experiences, but they are transformative. So the element of happiness exists here with this conjunction. It is very large, but it's coming from the result, as the result of profound change. However, where and by whom should this reversal be the greatest? Who in the first place needs to overcome fear, which is Pluto, and wakes up the conscious, which is Jupiter? These are certainly politicians, widely understood, and scientists, and especially those leading ones who hold power and who have positions in the world, because we are speaking here about Capricorn sign. They are responsible, in a way, for everything that is happening on the social level in this world. So it is not enough to relieve each of us individually of fear and to awaken our conscience and to accept responsibility. The conjunctions in Capricorn say that the key role is played by the people who hold the highest positions in societies and countries of the world. So politicians and scientists need to acknowledge to people what modern technologies are using and what is happening really in the world, and they have to understand, with the help of people, that dehumanized science and society makes no sense. So, of course, Jupiter also speaks about another thing that I wanted to mention also, as I said. Jupiter also speaks of laws, but not human laws, but about those that are forces in the universe, so universal laws. People must not touch those laws. As we learned from Sanskrit language, there is in Sanskrit language the notion and the word artam, which may be the first abstract term of Indian and perhaps human thoughts. It is from Rigveda, and it means order, truth, universal law. And since it is derived from the root r, which means to move, then it means that all the performances of everything individual have to be coordinated with this universal law. This term is something that man should not touch. The question, of course, is now, what do we know about universal law and why it is not taught in schools in college? And why do we teach that man or a human being can do whatever? It is almost like that in today's time. Pay attention to that, what kind of nonsense they teach people at schools, but there is no real knowledge. There is no real knowledge about universal laws. They were making fun of Indian people. Remember, they were colonized them because they were saying that Indian cannot take care of themselves. Many things like that happen. So what is that people study today, and why we do not know anything about those laws? In today's time, we are even in the position that every simple seller on the market understands those laws, those universal laws, and the truth that is in the universe better than many so-called intellectuals who has attained high schools. So we need to think a lot of why is this happening to us. And the last but not least, to add as some sort of a postscriptum here, what has become increasingly apparent over the last 30 years is some sort of infantilization of the population. So somebody makes us children, infantile, debilitated beings. And many are, of course, even accepting this. How is this happening? Well, for example, look at the marketing of insurance companies. So they are saying that you can travel wherever you want, you can jump from the highest rocks into the sea. Don't worry, they are taking care of your health. All in municipalities, many of the world, there are placards, they're written everywhere. We take care of this municipality, so we don't need to take care. Politicians will take care. And that goes on now. We don't have to learn languages because there is machine for this, click and then machine translated. We don't need to switch on the light when coming to our home because the light will switch on when we need it. And our refrigerator knows what we need to drink, etc. So that is going and going on. I think when the life stops in 2020, we will all have time to think of that. What is all this about? All this that is happening in our world. I want to quote at the end Liz Green, when she was writing about the age of Aquarius in her book Relating. And she mentions there that it's a time for us to grow up as a collective. So if it is possible to talk about the Aquarius era, and it seems that it is possible, then that era really means that from a psychological point, we should grow up as a collective. From the point of view of spiritual development, this means that we should become more conscious and we should widen our consciousness as individuals and as a collective. And that is all that I wanted to say about the conjunction of Saturn, of Pluto and Jupiter, like this generally speaking. And I just want to say that on my site, Symbolic Thinking, there is a course of astrology for beginners. It's an online course. If you want, you can order it. There are many different things in Serbian and Czech languages. I don't use English that much. I always promise that I will record and sell more things in English, then I don't have time, but maybe it will be. There are many my videos on YouTube about plutocracy, conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, about Saturn in Aquarius, and many other things. So if you wish, you can check all of those things. And of course, you can order personal consultancy with me based on astrological psychology or spiritual astrology. All contacts will be under this video on YouTube. I also offer consultations based on Thetahealing that I combine with other techniques that I learned. And I also offer an analysis of Feng Shui. I record and send in audio form some of my astrological readings. Check that also on my web pages named Symbolic Thinking. If you like this video, please like it, share it, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and thank you very much for that in advance. Until next time, I wish that we all live in the harmony with God and universal laws, in harmony with nature and with ourselves.